Welcome everybody to the latest episode of our Indie Dev Showcase, where each week we take a look at some of the many indie games that we've had a chance to play for our Wednesday night streams, and these videos are the recaps of it. Unless otherwise noted, all the games played were with press keys provided by a developer, and we are always looking for new games to show off. To get things started with, we are beginning with the kind of like 2D, almost like Terraria or Kingdom-esque game, Mists of Noyah. And please keep in mind that this was played during its early access and may not represent the current version of it. So the gameplay in this one, as we said, is 2D action / survival building. I gotta say, the pixel art for this game is really impressive, especially some of the effects of our spells here. But the general gameplay loop is that we go out to collect resources during the day that lets us either craft new gear that we can use, supplement our base, or hire more people to help us, which in turn will make it easier for us to defend our base during nighttime. Now the game can be played multiplayer as kind of like a shared server, with each character having different spells and abilities and so on and so forth. So this lady that I'm playing with has like kind of like water spirits and can summon things along those lines. Now, as you've been watching for the last minute or so, you may be noticing, I think, an immediate issue. That combat is kind of on the basic side. I just felt like I was just spamming the same attacks over and over again, and enemies were just kept like walking through them, and I couldn't do anything about it. Now, you do get to explore the world, as you can see here, which opens up things up for more combat and more resources. Now, I do believe at the time of this recording, the developers have either put out an updating or changing combat, or are working on one as we speak. So as I said at the start, this may not be currently relevant to where the game is at in its early access. But the world itself is procedurally generated, again, kind of fitting that Terraria model. And there's certainly some things to like about this game. I like the focus on more of an action-style exploration compared to Terraria, which was more, I don't want to say RPG, but was a little bit slower and less reactive from what I played. And again, some of these effects I think are really impressive for this kind of style. Again, my issue though is that I'm not sure at this point in time if everything is working as it should be in unison. The combat, as I said, is on the floaty side, and kind of the base building and just general resource grind is, well, more grindy than it is interesting. As you can see me just having to mash to break these trees down. And the onboarding could use some work, both in terms of getting the player up to speed and just making the beginning a little bit more enjoyable. Because it felt, again, like combat was just completely overwhelmed when nightfall occurred, and it seemed like it was more balanced around having multiple players, and I don't know if it was scaling in terms of, how many people are playing the game at a time. The only way I was actually like effectively or reasonably effective against fighting enemies was using all my high-costing spells. But again, if you have a slow mana recovery rate, as in this game, it's very easy to kind of just lose or burn out mana and then not really able to fight again. And this ghost guy was just ripping me apart. And again, this is day one, as you can see in the upper right. So it's not like I was playing this for like an hour or so and things escalated. So, with all that said, I do think there is potential here. Again, the presentation aesthetics definitely help this game out, but in the same breath, it definitely has to have a bit more in terms of onboarding and just general playability, I think, in order for it to pop. Moving on, we turn to the Bonfire 2. And this is a very light city builder / survival game, where your goal is to maintain a settlement of pioneers who are trapped in the wilderness, where every night monsters from all manner of strange places and lands come to try and kill us. The general gameplay loop is that during the day, you're going to be constructing and ordering your people around. This is very similar to kind of Colony Sim style, where each character gets put into a job, and then that job will basically level them up, and that'll be their role. So you assign someone to be a guard, they'll gain more stats in terms of being able to do damage. Fisherman, carpenter, gatherer, you get the picture. As you keep gathering resources, you're able to construct more buildings, which in turn unlocks more of the tech tree. Now, the characters, when they are kind of brought in or they arrive at your village, are randomly generated in terms of their stats, and they may come with additional traits that make them better suited for some kind of job. Could be better for combat, better gathering, and again, you get the picture. And you're able to equip them with various tools that can help them out. So it's essentially that city builder progression of start out small, get resources, grow in power, get more stuff, and repeat as long as you can survive. And I did like that gameplay loop. The problem that the Bonfire 2 has is that it doesn't really go anywhere in depth with it. And the more you play, you really start to see how samey the gameplay gets. In order to make any progress, you need to build one of every building, which means that there is no greater choice or depth to the city building. If you want to get bigger, you're just going to have to build one of each thing and repeat that no matter how many times you replay the game. Combat is completely out of your control. Characters will just kind of go out and do their own thing. And even as I played for I think it was a good hour, maybe a little bit older than that, I was getting more buildings, but it really wasn't changing my strategy or really giving me anything new to enjoy or appreciate. And unfortunately, a city builder without any kind of depth is just very much like akin to like those like mobile, Cityville, Farmville-esque kind of games. Which is a shame because I think the setting worked and the basic gameplay was easy to get into. But it's just a matter of not really going anywhere else with it. For our next game, we turn to Citadale, the Awakened Spirit. And this is a very much take on the Castlevania or Metroidvania kind of design. And as you're probably noticing right away, there's kind of an issue from a presentation point of view. We could not get this game full screen. There really wasn't like too many things in terms of menu options as well. But this is a game that is built entirely on Metroidvania design. As your task is to explore this castle, beat up the various creatures, gain more abilities to then let you explore and do more in it. As you've been watching, you've probably noticed that everything definitely follows that Castlevania vibe to it, but there's something off about this game. Your jumps are going to be largely committed. You don't have complete control of your character in the air. You have a very short attack range, as you can see with your little like red sword. And you've noticed I've been jumping and trying to avoid enemies whenever I can. And that's because getting health is very hard. You need to find like shopkeepers who can give you health back, and actual health in the level is rare. Also, that bat is like stalking me right now. I'm pretty sure he's going to attack me the second I get out of that menu. And it's just better to avoid combat, which is definitely a downside when the game throws so much at you. And it's also very hard to actually avoid some of these enemies. During boss fights, you run into that classic issue of you have to jump at an enemy to hit them, but they're also running at you, or they're flying or doing whatever, so you're going to hit them and then go into their hitbox and get hurt in the process. And unfortunately, everything about this game feels like a low-quality Castlevania game. And sadly, there are better examples of this kind of design out there that we have certainly played on stream. If you have completely, gone through all the Castlevanias and Metroidvanias on Steam, then there is some element of, decent play here for fans of the genre. But everything that I've played in it, sadly, has been done better and more polished in other games. And I reached kind of like my fill when I got to a point where it was just trying to make jumps over, death pits while the platforms kind of collapse when you step on them. And there are cases where it collapsed before it would register my jump, and I couldn't jump off in time. And this is on top of having to fight very annoying enemies and just being subbed in some very nasty spots, as you can see right here with this guy just kind of being able to snipe me. And unfortunately, again, a lot of the issues Citadale have really come down to playtesting and just approachability. With that said, we're going to take our quick break now, and when we come back, we have 3 more games to look at for this spotlight. And now for a quick thank you to our current Game Wisdom supporters and sponsors. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. Now available at most retailers are my current books on design. 20 Essential Games to Study is an intro-level look at 20 unique games to provide inspiration for any developer looking to get into the game industry. And the Game Design Deep Dive series each go into a top-to-bottom look at the design of a specific genre, with platformers and roguelikes now available, and horror coming in the near future. For our next game, we have Rogue Legacy 2. This is, of course, the sequel to one of the first takes of action roguelite design. Keep in mind that the footage here is played during its early access, and the game has been updated since this footage was recorded. But other than the very animated and, I think, really solid aesthetic, this is, of course, very much similar to the same gameplay loop as the first game. You'll use gold that you accumulate in the procedurally generated dungeon in order to unlock new content in the form of upgrading your manor, as well as buying new gear that you can use on subsequent plays. As with the first game, you'll get very crazy traits that can be associated to your character. So I have this rainbow trail behind me, there is mirror effects, and other strange things to come. Now, one of the big changes with Rogue Legacy 2 is that the various character classes have been given a little bit more leeway in terms of being different. It's no longer just having basically the same character variation but changing their stats. Each class now has their own weapon. As you can see, our warrior here, our barbarian, has this giant axe, wizard gets spells, and you get the picture. And this gives them a little bit more differentiation compared to the first game. Another new feature is that instead of having the Metroidvania upgrades tied to finding blueprints and various rewards, each area now has special kind of bonus challenges that once you find them and unlock them, this will unlock a new ability for all future characters. I think one of them is the ability to speak to spirits or see them, and I'm sure there's a lot more to uncover as well. Now, as you saw here with the bridge, I can't cross here yet because that wasn't available in the early access build, but I'm pretty sure that's in there now. As with the first game, part of the challenge of Rogue Legacy 2 is going to be surviving a lot of the very challenging boss fights and be able to avoid damage. And that's kind of where my concerns or my nitpicks with the version that I played live. It still feels very much built overly on persistent elements, and the fact that you really don't have a chance, I feel, starting out to even make a lot of progress. Enemies are as attack spongy as ever, and so are bosses like our little friend here. And you're going to have to make use of the persistent elements of your manor to just be able to survive some of these fights. The game is definitely a little bit more on the kind of bullet hell nature compared to the first game, and you're going to run into situations where enemies will attack off screen, and before you can even get the attack register on the screen, it's already close to hitting you, and it's still very hard to recover health. Now, I know developers have been working on that since this build, so that may not be a problem in the one that's available now. But with all that said, there is definitely a lot of promise. If you are a fan of the first Rogue Legacy, you're going to really enjoy this one. And if you didn't enjoy it, then you may want to keep an eye on this to see how they improve and maybe fix some of those nagging issues that may still be in Rogue Legacy 2. But with that, we now turn to Sheepo. This is a Metroidvania style game, where the general hook is that we play as this little creature here who has come to this planet to hunt down eggs of endangered species to try and save them for future generations. And to do that, he's going to have to steal the eggs, so there's a little bit of a weirdness here as we explore this strange world that appears to be somewhat post-apocalyptic as well. So, this is a non-linear style game, or quote-unquote non-linear. The world is open, but you are kind of locked based on what pet or animal forms you've acquired. And in order to get a new one, you're going to have to fight a boss. In the meantime, you have your basic Metroid or platforming abilities, running, jumping, wall jumping, all that good stuff. And you'll eventually unlock additional abilities and again, these different forms that you can take. And the game has a very, I think, cute look to it. The aesthetic is very clean and reminds me of some of the other kind of indie platformers we've played. With, I think the closest one would be something like the developer of Pinstripe and the other game that was released by him in late 2020. Now, you are, as we said, free to explore the world, and there are a ton of bonus challenges and additional things you can go for. And I don't remember if there are additional endings, but getting 100% is going to be a lot more challenging than just beating this game. Now, with that said, my main issue that I had with Sheepo was that it didn't really do anything unique with the genre. And this is one of those games I always like to say that once I finished playing it, it was hard for me to want to come back and play this one more to its completion. But I would say if you are looking for a Metroidvania platformer, and this would be, I would argue, maybe moderate in terms of difficulty, then give this one a try, or at least check it out just to see if you enjoy it. Because while it may not do anything that I think is overly unique, I didn't have any real issues with the gameplay or general core gameplay loop, and it felt overall solid from what we played on stream. With that, we turn to our final game for this video, and that's Otti Housekeeper. The game is described as a mix of puzzle and tower defense, and I don't know if I would go that far. The concept is that we are a retired burglar, and we are defending our various, I guess, safe houses of loot from would-be heroes. So the game itself is set up kind of like almost like a Lemmings or like obstacle-based destruction kind of game. Originally, I thought this was going to be more along the lines of Neighbors from Hell, where you kind of move around the environment making use of it to deal with the bad guy. Here, how it works is that each room or each house is completely set, and you're going to spend resources to put down various traps, with the traps each doing something different. It could scare somebody, it could remove a piece of armor, they could be weak against it, you get the picture. And your job is to stop all the people from entering your home before they reach your treasure that's usually at the top of the place. But the quicker you can stop them before they get other loot will also determine your rating, and again, 1 to 3 stars. So as you saw in me placing these items around, that you are very much limited in terms of where they can go. They all have kind of a predefined area, and you're going to have to basically make use of everything that you can afford, because the characters all move automatically, and you have no real impact after the level begins. I think at most you can maybe trigger like this trap, as you can see right here, but again, it can be a little janky in terms of getting things to work. As the game goes on, you'll eventually unlock, or you'll have to be challenged, by fighting characters who have resistances. They could wear armor you have to deal with. And there's also kind of a mini game where you have to get a key or solve a kind of a moving box puzzle. Unfortunately, my big problem with this game is that I really kind of got bored of it. The idea of defending your home using, Home Alone style traps is an interesting one. But you're so limited in what your options are that it's very hard to try and do anything, against the grain or be creative. There is one quote-unquote best solution, and that's it. And if you try to do anything else, you are not going to get all the stars. And it's a shame, because I think this idea definitely has some great elements to it. But with everything being so linear, it just kind of ruins that idea. And it's just a case of, you're going to have to just repeat everything. And as you can see with a map like this, the character just starts almost immediately, and then you're kind of placing things along the way. But even then, I'm still having to do the same thing, or have the same basic strategy. So, ultimately, I hate to say it, but I think this one will be a pass, but I would love to see somebody take this concept and make something a little bit more in-depth with it. With that said, we're going to wrap up this indie showcase here. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you're new, check out the Discord and Patreon link down below. If you'd like me to go to your game in the future, please get in touch. And tune in next Wednesday for another indie showcase stream. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.